We're on.
Welcome back, everybody. My book won't stay in its place there. This is Two Beards in a Bible. I'm John Swaino.
I'm Dave Tenney.
And we're glad that you chose to join us again. Hopefully you'll stick around for a little bit and see if we have anything good to say.
I'm going to wait for the same thing, right?
Very good. All right, so we're in Matthew chapter 27.
Yeah, and we're going to back up a little bit because we forgot about Judas.
Yes.
So we talked all about Jesus and his crucifixion on the cross, but we skipped over talking about Judas, which kind of happened before that. So we're going to back up and just talk about that a little bit.
All right. So Matthew chapter 27, starting at verse 3, is where I'll begin reading. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? You see to it. Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because they are the price of blood. And they consulted together and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was priced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me.
Okay, and if since we'll just read them all, so if we go over to Acts chapter 1, starting in, I think it's a verse 18, but so in Acts chapter 1, we're talking about how Matthias is chosen as a apostle. It says, men and brethren, this scripture had to be filled, which the Holy Spirit spoke before by the mouth of David concerning Judas, who became a guide to those who arrested Jesus. For he was numbered with us and obtained a part in this ministry. Now this man purchased a field with the wages of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst open in the middle, and all his entrails gushed out. And it became known to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, so that the field is called, in their own language, Akeldama, that is, field of blood. And of course, I think as in Matthew chapter 27 again, 27 through 31, I think it says something about it too. Nope. Never mind.
Okay. Never minded.
Never minded. So Judas. So Judas, he betrayed Jesus with a kiss. Mm-hmm. And after he did that, he knew he had done the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And, we were talking I believe it was the last episode, we were talking about the thief on the cross.
Yeah.
And how he had shown some fruits of repentance in the way that he spoke to Christ, and the way that he admitted his wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And seemed to have a desire to do things differently, at least for that last couple of moments of his life. Rebuking the other thief that was blaspheming Christ. And, what do we see with Judas? We see a person who's done wrong. He's sinned, and sin is sin in the eyes of God. But Judas does something different, and it puts him in a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I'm always sad when I think about Judas.
Yeah.
Because he just, Judas could have been forgiven of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was possible for him to be forgiven, but he decided to take matters in his own hands.
Sometimes you hear people say, well, isn't that just awful that God chose a man to be the betrayer, and that he didn't have a choice in being a betrayer, and then he was just condemned because he did what the will of God is. That's the kind of thinking that sometimes we let ourselves go down that path. Right. But realizing that God didn't make him do that.
God chose Judas, and Judas stepped up to the plate to do what was wrong.
Right.
And it was all on him. God didn't make him do these things.
Right.
God would have found another, or I wouldn't say would have found another person, but another person would have stepped up to do it.
And it's spoken of, in prophecy and so on, and those prophecies were to be fulfilled. But realizing that God is God and he knows all things. He knows the beginning and he knows the end. He can see everything in the middle. And he foreknew the things that would happen because he's God.
Yes.
It's just that simple. Not to sound trite, but it just is what it is. And so we read those things and everything, and that lends itself to the truthfulness of the scriptures when we can look back and see that, yes, this must be God because he knew all these things would fall into place. And so Judas, as you said, stepped up to the plate and did those things. But there again, God did not force him to be condemned. Even though he fulfilled that prophecy, he could have been saved.
Yeah, absolutely.
With everybody else. Now, I think Christ, knowing his heart, probably knew, certainly knew that he wouldn't, but the possibility was there.
Yeah.
So don't put the fact that Judas chose not to be obedient to the Lord. Don't put that on God.
Don't whittle on God's end of the stick, John.
That's some good preaching right there.
Right. So, another thing that a lot of people talk about when we talk about Judas is they'll say, "Oh, the Bible has errors in it because in Matthew it says that Judas hanged himself, and in Acts it says he burst open in the middle." Mm-hmm. So how do we work through that?
Sometimes you just have to think. And sometimes you have to rely on some other people that have done some thinking, and read what they have to say. I'm not a huge fan of commentaries, but you gifted to me a commentary that I think seems to be pretty good, and I'll look into it once in a while. And here we did just before we started this episode, just to look into this thing. And one of the things that was mentioned in that commentary is that when you see something that seems not to line up in the scriptures, don't immediately run to calling it an inconsistency.
Right.
But realize that perhaps both things can be true.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what we have here. We have an instance where yes, Judas went and returned the 30 pieces of silver.
Yep.
And went and hanged himself in the field.
Yep.
But what
happened to his body?
Well, first, what happened to the money? He left it with them in the temple, but what did
they wouldn't put it in the treasury.
And isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
There's so much there that this is blood money.
Yeah.
They knew it was blood money.
Yeah.
They're admitting, in effect, that this is Jesus the Christ. They knew that. They knew it, yet they, in order to save.
So they know they commit a sin. They're basically admitting that here.
Yeah. They had full. This shows that they had full understanding. In a court of law, this would show that, well, you're the murderer.
Yeah, you had 100% understanding of what it had done, what happened. So they went and they took Judas's money, and they went and bought this field.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't put it in the treasury.
Yeah.
And it says Judas hung himself, and then it seems like he hung himself, and then wherever he was hanging at, he must have fell down.
And fell headlong and split open in the middle.
Yeah. Rope probably wasn't as good as it is today, right?
Yeah.
Or wherever he was doing, or whatever he hung himself off of. We don't know. Could have been off the side of a cliff.
And that's all speculation as to how and where, and but the whole point is that both things can be true.
Yeah, and both things are true.
Yeah. The money that was his.
Yeah.
Because it was pushed off by those that he threw it at.
Yeah.
that money was used to buy this place.
Yeah.
So he purchased it.
In a sense, he purchased it.
And
it was his money.
And he fell headlong in that place.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so that's like Bible study 101, and we have to learn this over and over and over again. We can't allow those seeds of doubt to get in.
Yeah.
That's Satan working.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we read something like that and we say, well, there's an inconsistency. And then some people will just close the Bible and say, well, that's just not true.
Yeah. What a bunch of bunk.
But when you look into it and understand and think about the context and understand that the accounts are written from different perspectives, yet every word of it is true.
Yep. Yeah. We have Matthew writing this. We have who wrote Acts? Luke. Luke wrote Acts.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I kept thinking Theophilus. I'm like, no. That's who he wrote it to.
Right.
So Luke wrote Acts and the book of Luke. So, and I want to say that Luke, that Luke wrote the biggest part of the New Testament.
Oh yeah.
Word wise. Yeah. So if you look at if you do a word count, so Luke wrote the most of the New Testament because he wrote the Gospel of Luke and he wrote the book of Acts, which comprise a lot of.
That lines up with what we read there in the very beginning of Luke. That he had a perfect understanding, as he says in Luke 1:3, of all things, and he wanted an orderly account. So he was a fastidious person.
Yes. Yep.
That wanted to have great detail.
Yep, absolutely, and he did.
And so that would lead to
Yeah, reading Luke and then reading Acts is a good read because they just flow right together. And then, of course, Paul's writings. Paul was the second greatest
He's the one
author.
you think of all the time.
Yep, and then John wrote a lot as well because you think about the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the Book of Revelation. So John wrote a lot of the New Testament. In fact, those three writers wrote most of the New Testament. So. All right, so let's move on to, since we're in Matthew, we'll stay in here. We'll start in verse 1. And this is after Jesus has been put on the cross, and now Jesus is going to rise.
At chapter 28, verse 1. All right. You reading or am I?
Go ahead.
So this is first 15 verses?
Yep.
You stop me if you find a stopping point along the way. So 28 at verse 1. Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. And the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. But the angel answered and said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, and he said, 'Come see the place where the Lord lay. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you.' So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to bring his disciples word."
Okay, let's stop there and talk about that.
All right.
Okay, so we have, so after the Sabbath, which is what day? Saturday, right? It says, as the first day of the week began to dawn. So that's how we can know. Even today, the calendar starts on Sunday, right? And we've got a couple of Marys, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. I'm not sure who that is right now. And behold, there was a great earthquake. So there's a lot of supernatural things going on. And an angel of the Lord comes down out of heaven. I'd be pretty nervous at this point.
Yeah. And that had to be quite a show with the earthquake and his countenance being like lightning.
Yeah. Yeah. And he comes down and he rolls. How big was this stone? Was that a big stone?
I think so.
Yeah. And on top of here, there are a couple of Roman guards. Mm-hmm. It says, and the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men.
Yeah.
Now listen, Roman guard, you think the Marines are tough? The Roman guards, you didn't fool with them.
Don't tell your uncle that.
You know, the Marines are tough, but they don't kill you in the Marines if you disobey.
Right.
And the Romans were pretty...
It's very fair to say that these guys had seen some things.
Oh, yeah.
And for them to pass out would be...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to say. So this angel comes down and he moves the thing back, and the Roman guard, they can't even do anything. And the angel talks to him, and he tells him that, don't be afraid. The Jesus who you crucified, he's not here, he's risen. So Jesus rose from the dead on a Sunday, right? So that's an important thing to think about when we think about us worshiping on Sunday.
Right.
So Jesus rises on Sunday, and it's a new day.
And as you point out, I mean, that this lends to our understanding of what we do here today. It's important to pay attention to that detail is not just thrown in there.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times, like, we might wonder, well, why do we go to church on Sunday? Well, because a lot of things happened on Sunday, on the first day of the week.
Yeah.
In fact, I did a lesson on that not too long ago about why we worship on Sunday.
Yeah.
But I can't recall any of the points right now.
Growing up, did you, if someone asked you when you were 10 years old what the first day of the week was, what would you say?
Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't, I'm ashamed to think of how old I was when I came to realize, the first day of the week is Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
Because our lives are so patterned after this, whatever Gregorian calendar or whatever.
SON day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's weird too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting thing, and I know that's just an English language thing.
Right.
But it's an interesting thing to think about. So the women are supposed to go quickly and tell the disciples. And I wonder how that's going to play out. So verse 9.
They said, when they tell the disciples, they're speaking of they leave the tomb. They went out quickly from the tomb in verse 8, and with fear and great joy.
Yes.
So obviously it's a joyous occasion, but what's happening?
Yes, absolutely.
That it's starting to come together. All those things that had been told by Christ, and that I'll be raised on the third day, and
it takes them a while for all this stuff to sink in.
Yeah, and we have to give the people a little bit of a break, because if we were hit with all of these things at once, we have perfect view, hindsight, looking back and being able to understand and see these things.
And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, rejoice. So they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. And then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren, go to Galilee where they will see me. So Jesus meets the women, right? That's the way I read that.
Yeah. Yep. As they went to tell the disciples, behold, Jesus
meets them. Now, while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. Well, the guards telling the truth.
Yeah.
And when they had assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, tell them his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept. Do you think the Romans are ready to say this?
Right. and that just kind of, again, this is something that we would see today.
Yeah.
Just here's some money, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure. We're going to take care of it. So he took the money and did as they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day, and probably until this day, today, this is still being said.
Yeah.
Right.
You're picking up in verse 16 there?
Nope. So now we got to go to Luke chapter 24. And Luke is, I went the wrong way. Luke 24, starting at verse 13.
All right. Now behold, two of them were stop me when you want me to stop.
Yeah.
Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they talked together of all the things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained, so that they did not know him. And he said to them, What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Then the one, whose name was Cleopas, answered and said to him, Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? Have you not known the things which happened there in these days? And he said to them, What things? So they said to him, The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us when they did not find his body. They came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. Then he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself.
Okay, we'll stop there. So Jesus appears to two of his disciples. Now, it doesn't seem like these are his apostles.
Right.
Right? These are just two
Followers.
We don't know a whole lot about them. We know one is named Cleopas, and they're talking together, and they're kind of sad about these things, and as you would be.
Yeah.
And they're probably just, it says they were reasoned. They're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah.
And, not putting all the things together. Now, we don't know, it was spoken, that he would be raised up on this very day. And so wouldn't you think this would start to fall in line, and you'd think, well, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
But they were working it out.
They were
trying to work it out. And that's, a credit to them that they were talking it through.
Yep.
And sometimes when we're talking things through and trying to figure things out, maybe it's not the happiest time in our lives because we're frustrated. And they were in much the same condition.
And they meet this stranger, and they're not afraid to tell him about all of these things.
Yeah.
So they're, it kind of speaks to their faith.
Yeah.
So Jesus says, he goes, O foolish ones of slow of heart, to believe in all that the prophets have spoken.
Yeah.
And then he kind of and then it says at the beginning that Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them all the scriptures of the things concerning himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that statement that he makes there in verse 25, slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. So, he's telling them to pay attention to everything, the context of everything in the scriptures. And if you do that, you can see that these things are falling into place. And that's true for us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many people today are slow of heart to believe the entirety of the scriptures.
Yeah.
They believe what they're told. They believe this scripture because they're told that, all I have to do is just love Jesus. Jesus saved me, John 3:16.
Right.
If we hang our hat on John 3:16, but we forget the rest of it.
Right.
We're the same, we're slow of heart to believe the entirety.
Absolutely.
Scriptures.
Absolutely.
There's a sermon in there.
Oh, there is. Easily. Easily. So I'll read through 35. It says, Then they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone further. But they constrained him, saying, Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent. And he went in to stay with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us? So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11, and those who were with them gathering together, saying, The Lord is risen indeed, and has appeared to Simon. And they told about the things that had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Mm-hmm. So, obviously the things that Jesus was saying to them as they were talking was definitely having an effect on them. And it's interesting that they didn't know him by his outward appearance.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. It says that their it was not their eyes were blinded, but that
it says later that their eyes were opened.
Yeah. Earlier on, it said
their eyes were restrained.
Restrained. Thank you.
In verse 16.
Yep.
I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
I'm not sure it matters that I know what that means.
Yeah, it's just basically that they were kept from understanding who he was. It's kind of a testament to their faith, and I think the things that we were talking about before, it gives us a picture of those. Jesus didn't, come to them, and he did call them foolish and slow of heart.
Yeah,
but there's not he didn't strike them down or say that they were going to be lost forever. He understands, and he taught them from the scriptures. He taught them from the word. It's the same thing, it's just the same thing that we have to do today. We have to be taught by the word to come to the understanding, so that in effect our eyes are restrained if we don't do those things.
Yeah.
Our eyes become open by hearing the scriptures.
Absolutely. So they broke bread with him, and then their eyes were opened, and Jesus vanished.
Yeah.
And,
That had to be something.
Oh, yeah. That left an impression. And
Never believe what I saw.
Right.
They were sad, but you can bet that, as they left there, they were worked up a little.
And we don't know how far away, it's interesting, we don't know how far they were away from Jerusalem. We could get a map out and probably kind of figure it out. Because they were drawing near to a village where they were going, but it doesn't say where that was at.
Right.
But it says they got up that very hour and went to Jerusalem and found the... So this you don't get up at the end of walking all day and travel to another place in darkness. You don't do that unless it's like something important.
I'm sure there's dangers on the road.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's people that you probably don't want to meet on a dark road.
Absolutely. Even today.
Yeah.
John, that'll break it up for this evening.
All right. Well,
we've gone as far as we can.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining in. Again, I think we had fun. Hopefully you had some fun listening to it and learned something along the way. We welcome your input. You can reach out to us by our email address that you can find on our channel. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.